What's up, everybody? Unrested here, and this is Osoroshii Saturday. Tales of Asia's darkest and most obscure and disturbing legends. What we're going to go ahead and do today is a little bit different than what you're used to. It's a dark and rainy day here, so I'm going to read some creepy nightmares given to me by my viewers. These are personal nightmares that they donated to Osoroshii Saturday in order to have me read and share with you, the viewer and listener. So we're going to start here first with Charlie's. He said, I had a nightmare recently that shook me. I was walking around in this forest and there was this crow looking up at me. He was a humanoid type crow, and it had a really long, thin, bone-colored face, kind of like a plague doctor's mask mixed with a bird's head. It had two huge wings that were like a cape, and two tiny arms that had super sharp claws. It eventually got close to me and wrapped its cape-like wings around me and pulled me closer and closer to these tiny knife-sharp type claw hand thingies, which eventually it used to dig into my torso and rip into my stomach, leading to my death. I'm pretty tall, IRL 6'3", but this thing towered over me. It was pretty spooky. It made these creepy ass whispering sounds too. I don't know if I would consider it creepy enough to make a video, but I felt like sharing. Well, thank you, Charlie. Michael says, when I was very young, I had a reoccurring dream that was entirely in claymation. My family was sitting in our living room when a dark storm cloud rolled in and the power went out. We lit some candles and the tables under the candles began to melt. Out of nowhere, a river of clay ran into the room through the cracks beneath the doors. The river began to rise and take shape of a giant, disfigured man. The man took my mother's arm and dragged her through the crack beneath the door, smashing her body flat, while assimilating her corpse with his own. My sister and I were crying uncontrollably, while my dad did his best to secure the house, plugging the cracks under our two doors. He tried to console us, but nothing could erase what we had just seen. My sister and I cried, and our tears put out the candles. Our tears filled the holes, melted into the floor by the candles, and started to overflow. Our sorrow had created a lake from which another horrifying creature took shape and swallowed our father whole. The last thing I saw before waking up screaming was my dad's bloody face, screaming from a hole in the beast's stomach, telling us to run, as he too was assimilated. Naomi writes, I once woke up into a nightmare. Opening my eyes, I was in a cramped, dirty room. There was a large window with no drapes. Hazy yellow sunlight drenched the tiny, squalid room. The heat from it was oppressive and sticky. I lay on a single mattress in the middle of the room, staring at the ceiling, trying to gather my thoughts. I had to do something, but what, I couldn't remember. I felt like I had been hit by a truck. Grit and sweat covered me. My body felt sluggish, and the thought of movement ached my muscles. Then a cell phone rang. I instinctively reached over to answer it, and my body reacted in kind. Fire licked at my limbs, but the action was complete. It was my mother on the other end. She was frantic. They couldn't find my younger brother. He was last seen with friends of our older brothers. Flashbacks to the night before, and I'm on my feet, struggling to walk or run. I'm running through the projects, concrete slabs and iron walls. Every corner I turn, every narrow alley was drenched in hazy sunlight and suffocating heat. I find my way to the outside where one of my older brothers is telling me I have to find my younger brother. I scream at him saying, "What the fuck do you think I'm doing?" I have a splitting headache and I shove him off me. In my memories from the night before, I see my little brother shooting heroin in the back of a busted-up Cadillac. I was so mad and so furious, I'm yelling and screaming, but he couldn't or wouldn't listen to me, so I left. The guys he were with had guns. I knew in my gut that he was in danger. By this time, I'm not far from where we were the night before. The Cadillac still in the same place, but now abandoned. As I'm entering a dilapidated brick building, I hear a gunshot. I don't breathe. Adrenaline hits, and my body moves without thought. I find the apartment. People are screaming out. They're full of panic and fear. I find my brother's body in a pool of blood on a decaying couch. His eyes are like glass. I'm grabbing at him, trying to hold him, screaming my lungs out. I pull my head up slowly to look over my shoulder. Before I can see who it is behind me, I'm stabbed in the side of the head with a screwdriver. It's the only dream I've ever had where I've woken up screaming and crying. Camden says, for myself, my most horrific dream was also a life-changing dream. I think that it is fairly uncommon for most people to actually die in their own dreams, from what I've seen. But I have died once in my dreams and have felt the utmost indescribable and terrifying feeling of what I believe fully experiencing death would be like. I can try to describe this as best as I can. I don't remember much of the beginning of the dream, but I do know that at the time it was one of those dreams that felt like hyper-realistic. I remember storming out of my childhood home to cool off from a heated argument with a very close family member. It was a hot and sunny day with a beautiful clear sky and gleaming ocean on the horizon. With tears in my eyes, I sat under a huge tree in our yard and stared up at the sky. Watching a stealth bomber streak across the sky, I noticed a parachute drop from the plane, and a bright flash blinded me for a few seconds. I figured it was a bomb that had just gone off, and I was helplessly watching as fireballs consumed the perfectly blue sky and grew bigger as it approached the ground where I stood. Pressure wave, air sucked out, my lungs in immense pain, vacuum sinuses, collapsed lungs, searing skin. I looked back at my house and watched for a brief instant as it was there and then gone. My loved ones, their skin melt, their bones bursting into flames, and then void, not even blackness, pure void. In that moment of transition, the only way I can try to compare it is to feeling like you're falling, but instead of the sensation of your body falling forwards to the ground, you feel the whole universe, the dream itself, perpetually move away from you, if that makes sense. I try to breathe, I try to inhale, but nothing responds, a pure vacuum. I try to feel any sense of physical stimulation, nothing responds. I am pure consciousness, I feel no sense of the physical world. Suddenly, the only thing I could do is feel my thoughts take on mass and bombard my consciousness at every moment. Suddenly, fear, regret, confusion, sadness, jealousy, hatred, pain, everything I've ever felt through life hits me as a single emotion in a single moment. This moment feels like it's bending any concepts of what it means to exist in space and time. I just want to go back. I just want anything. I just want my old world back. I want my family, my friends, to feel the warmth. In my last collective thoughts of consciousness and organized thoughts, I feel this depth of helplessness to which no being could ever fathom. Lucas says, this is an old one. When I was young, I often had the sensation that I was getting sucked into sleep. Probably because every time that happened, I desperately tried to stay awake. It was like I was 7 or 8 back then. Every time, back to back, after this sensation, I couldn't keep myself awake. I found myself in my own bed, in my own room. The curtain next to my bed warped into the shape of a floating witch, as if it was trying to push through the curtain to get to me. Her long, crooked nose was clearly recognizable through the fabric. When I saw this happen, I slowly got the feeling of getting sucked towards her, like being high up on a building, looking over an edge and feeling afraid, but somehow also being tempted to jump, or maybe exactly like the feeling of getting sucked into sleep. The force would become strong until it was like trying to resist the sucking power of a black hole. The witch would open her mouth from behind the curtain and start screaming, making me lose grip on my bed, sucking me into the curtain. After I wake up, I would sometimes have other normal dreams, but the nightmare was always at the start of all my dreams. Raven says, I apologize in advance for the length of this. By far, my most horrifying nightmare took place when I was about 11. I was spending the night at my friend's house. The night before was just like every other sleepover we had, staying up too late, watching movies, listening to music, talking, or even cleaning. I'd like to make note that my friend's family still had deep ties to an old religion, one they brought over from Thailand when immigrating, and my friend and I would often talk about the logistics of this religion and its black magic. Even still, before this night, nothing decidedly odd had ever really happened to us. Granted, I'd seen my friend sleepwalk a few times, but even then, that was no big deal. Anyway, we went to sleep. Now, I've always been a vivid dreamer, but never had my dreams or nightmares ever been like this. I was outside in my friend's backyard, and the two of us were hanging out. All was well until I began to notice that there was this high-pitched humming noise, like a very loud, muffled whispering, a ringing in my ears. In the dream, I tried to talk over it. I was to the point of yelling to my friend, even though she was right next to me, and she couldn't hear my voice. It was almost like I couldn't actually speak, and then I heard the whispering voices begin to call me. I felt, quote-unquote, their presence before I actually saw where the noise was coming from. On the other side of the chain-link fence between our backyards, these misty little shapes began to appear. There were 4, and they began to morph into the shapes of children, but they were very off. These kids were so pale, I could see their veins standing out from beneath their sickly purplish-gray skin, in stark contrast to their mangled black hair. They were wearing clothes that had been tattered and molded, of a style that was of the early 20th century. They reached out to me, their hands covered in dirt and their fingernails broken or missing. Even to this day I can recall the smell of them. They stank of mold and mildew and were rotting, giving off this sickening odor too foul to accurately describe. Worst of all was these eyes of these kids. Some of these kids had no eyes, the others white, and some of them black from corner to corner. The longer I looked at them, the closer I realized they were getting, gliding towards me. They touched the fence like it burned them, smoke rising up, but tried to get through it anyway. They gripped the fence with their mud-caked, broken hands, and their bodies began to snake and convulse. They screamed in this terrible wail that still haunts me to this day. That sound jump-started me in the dream because I took my friend's hand and we ran back towards her house. But as we moved around, something more odd occurred. Our backyard seemed to morph and change, becoming a forest in the dark. Usually I find comfort in forests, but not in this one. In fact, as we climbed up the foothills and tried to get back to her home, I saw cloaked people coming towards us. They were corralling us, calling to us to be their guests of honor, to, quote-unquote, meet their master. They laughed in this sort of eldritch tone. His children want to play with you. Finally, we seemed to be able to find our way out of this dense forest and ran into her home as fast as we possibly could. I remember feeling that tangible panic as though I were awake. I can recall the absolute terror I had, absolutely certain that whatever these children/things were, they knew that I could see them, and they were coming for me and my friend. In the dream, my friend told me to calm down. I tried to listen and to ease my worry. She pulled back the curtains of her window to show me that there was nothing there. Much to my surprise, she was right. I could see no ghosts, no monsters, and my feelings of terror were eased. I even pressed my hand to the window. And that's when it got pulled down, straight through the glass, as though a portal, while one of these molding children climbed up the side of the wall. She held my hand so tight that I could feel pain. Worse yet was the way she tugged on me, trying to get out. She was slamming onto the window with her sticky little hands and feet, thrashing and whipping fervently. I meant to scream when I finally woke up and jolted, but I cannot remember a time when my heart had hurt so badly, beating so quickly from fear. My friend had been awake, and she was staring at me in concern. Panting and pasty as hell, I explained what happened. Trying to rationalize my fear, she pulled the curtains back, as she had in the dream. Now here is where the story gets interesting. I wouldn't believe this had I not seen it myself, but all over that window were smarmy little hands and footprints from the outside. This next one is from Anna. I think this may be more of a thriller than a nightmare, but a couple of days ago I dreamed that I went to a cruise with some similar people to my sister. Neither of us looked like we do, but I knew which people they were, so this cruise had some sort of blackout, and afterwards everything turned crazy. there were these alien demonic yokai looking creatures that started appearing and massacring people. It all happened so soon that people were unaware of the danger, meaning many people were killed without even having the chance to comprehend the situation and try to escape. It was very gory and just, well, horrendous. Those poor people, they were killed in herds, so only some of them had time to scream, and those screams were piercing. One minute we were enjoying a fun cruise, the next we were scared for our lives. Next one is one from my friend Justin Sink, who's also known as Nice Pasta. It's an entirely self-made video by him, and I'm going to just go ahead and post his video here. And if you do enjoy this video, I highly recommend you go and check out his channel as well afterwards. Alright guys, that was Osoroshii Saturday, the nightmare episode. I hope you enjoy hearing different people's nightmares. If you have your own nightmare to share, feel free to hand it in. And until next time, I'm Unrested, and this is Osoroshii Saturday. Have a good one.